We are right on the edge of the burn now. We can see some trees that have some burn marks on them.
This is a really fresh example. So that tree is burned, and then 10 meters to the other side of it, the tree is fine. I don't know about the dynamics of fire. I'm not a fire expert, but I think that's just a really interesting observation.
These edge areas, the edges of forest, are also important wildlife habitats because of, I guess, the variety of trees and habitat.
We're 100 meters off the main road, and we saw 3 animals right away.
The owl was the coolest. I hope we see that again. This is Yukon Wildlife and Wildfire.
In this series, we take a walk in the woods and look at how the forest changes and evolves after wildfire. At every step, we're on the lookout for plants and animals, big and small.
And sometimes we ask passionate researchers and experts to chime in. I'm Karen McCall.
And I'm Carrie McClelland. We're both naturalists with the Yukon Department of Environment's Wildlife Viewing Program. We don't leave home without binoculars and field guides.
This podcast is for everyone who has burning questions about wildlife and wildfire.
That's good. I see what you did there.
Fire's over, but that's only just the start. Just the start.
Carrie, do you ever have to explain to people what your job is as a naturalist?
Yeah, I do. I think if I say that, people will imagine that I just frolic through the woods all the time. But as naturalists, we know a little bit about a lot of stuff, but we're not experts in any one particular field.
I'm newer to the Yukon Wildlife Viewing team, but I know this podcast idea has been brewing for a while. So how did it come about?
Well, when you drive the North Klondike Highway, or any highway in the Yukon, really, you can see the evidence of different wildfires of different ages wherever you go. And I was driving up with my mother and a friend, and we came around a bend somewhere near Pelly Crossing, and there had been a fresh fire. And it was shocking to see this moonscape of blackened stumps and trees, and it looks apocalyptic. It looks like the end of the world. And my mom and her friend had so many questions. Can the trees burn again? What lives here? What's growing? Why are some things green? And I did my best in interpreting them, but it was really eye-opening for me how many questions people have when they see these kinds of things. And so I thought, what a great opportunity while people are driving to answer some of those questions and point out that these forests are not dead per se, that new life is coming out of them. And at each stage of that regrowth, you can see different plants or animals growing there. And so I just thought like an audio tour would be a great way to share that with other folks who are driving the highways.
Great answer. Do you do this for a living? I think it's fair to say that this podcast is for all the people who have burning questions about wildfires and wildlife.
Well done. Yes.
Seriously, though, I guess one of the things with wildfire is that it can be very destructive. We need to acknowledge that people do sometimes lose their homes, especially in other parts of the country. There have been some very serious fires, and so we don't want to downplay the seriousness of fires, but we want to emphasize the ecological benefits of it.
From an ecological perspective, destruction and devastation isn't the whole story. Fire is one of the main forces that shapes our landscape, and a lot of Yukon's forests and plants and animals that live there actually rely on fire, either directly or indirectly.
Yukon's boreal, what we call the boreal forest, which is it's actually the largest biome in the world, and some people call it the lungs of the world. And this is a zone that is used to fire.
That's Mike Flanagan we just heard from. He has done all sorts of important things in the world of fire, but his job title is, let me get this right, BC Innovation Research Chair in Predictive Services, Emergency Management, and Fire Science at Thompson Rivers University.
That's quite the title. Can we just call him Fire Guy?
That's what he goes by, the Fire Guy. So Mike says that fires have been influencing our forests since the last ice age, which is when vegetation started to return to the landscape.
Our trees have learned to survive and thrive in a regime of semi-regular, stand replacing, stand renewing, high-intensity fire. That is their environment.
Fire guy Mike, he sums that up nicely.
He does. And like Mike says, the boreal forest is huge. It covers everywhere in the Yukon that has forest, which is a lot of the Yukon, everywhere except the glaciated areas and the places above tree line. So everywhere that has boreal forest has burned at some point.
Right, because there's no 10,000-year-old trees out there. So these trees are all regrowths or regrowths of regrowths.
Yes, many fires many times over since the last ice age. In fact, the fire cycle in the Yukon is about every 50 to 200 years. So that's the range when you might expect to see a forest burn.
That's a huge range.
It is a huge range. There are many factors. The fire we're going to visit today is actually one that was on the smaller, shorter end of this range. The forest was about 65 years old when it burned, and it was human-caused.
This is the Ibex Valley fire, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people probably call it that. It's technically called the Takhini Bridge Fire, which is a name given to it by Yukon Wildlife Fire. It was started in July 2023, so 2 years ago, and some folks were doing some target practice in the nearby gravel pit. One of the targets exploded, created a fire.
Right. It was really hot and dry that summer. And I just remember because I was on a canoe trip, and that kind of weather is fabulous for a canoe trip, but not so great for fire conditions.
Exactly. It was hot and dry, and this fire is about 50 kilometers from Whitehorse and close to some people's homes. And so the fire was fought aggressively and contained. So it's a small wildfire. It's only about 12 square kilometers, but like I said, relatively close to Whitehorse.
It's a fire that's relatively close, and so it gives us an amazing opportunity to go out and visit it during the stages of regrowth and watch the wildlife return to it.
Yeah, and I think many folks headed out in that first spring right after the fire because they know what grows in that first spring after the fire.
People know of the Morel harvest.
The Morel mushrooms. Yeah, I'd headed out one night after work to go picking, and as you said earlier, like you go to a recent burn and it looks so dead. It's just everything's black, the ground, the standing trees, everything. And then you train your eyes and then you see these little mushrooms with their brain-like caps growing up, and it's just like a treasure hunt, and you start to see them all over. It's pretty exciting.
I think it's so special because that's the only time you really get to see morel mushrooms. They're adapted to growing right after a fire. So they need a burn to come through, clear away all the vegetation so that the sun can reach the soil, heat up the spores, which are like mushroom seeds, essentially spores, and then the morels pop up. And they only grow for 1 or 2 seasons in the spring right after a fire. And then they kind of go dormant again, and you have to go hunting for them in another burn.
Yeah, the mushrooms disappear, but lots of other things grow up. So it's still fun to go out there. And we're going to head out to look and see what has grown up now 2 years after the fire.
So no more mushrooms, but lots of other things are starting to pop up.
Leaving the urban sprawl of Whitehorse, the Alaska Highway winds through rolling mountains. Just 30 minutes later, we turn off the highway just before the Takhini Bridge, which this fire is named for. So I think the viewpoint, right here, sorry. Yeah, exactly. We're in an overlap area of the traditional territories of 2 Yukon First Nations, Champagne and Ajax First Nations and Kwanlin Dun First Nation. If we had been approaching from the other direction on the highway, the fire scar of the Takhini Bridge Fire would be glaring on the hillside. But from our angle, it's less obvious until we get closer. It's a nice spot, hey?
Yeah. No, I pulled up here, and is that like a groomer for cross-country ski trails?
We parked before the gravel pit near a small bush road.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some, trails here.
Ahead, the hillside is black. If this road wasn't here, we'd be bushwhacking through the understory of a mixed evergreen and aspen forest.
Oh, there's a burn tree.
Suddenly,
I don't know.
a movement ahead.
That was an owl because it's so quiet.
A large bird of prey swoops out of the trees. An owl, we think. These edge habitats, where the edge of the burn meets the forest, are known as being hotspots for wildlife. The burn offers fresh food sources and easy travel, while the forest offers the cover of safety.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's super cool. Look, it's a bunny.
A snowshoe hare bounds out of the undergrowth. We might have accidentally foiled the owl's meal plans. The bunny, not the scientifically accurate name for a hare, gets away this time. Since we're still in the bushy forest, there are plenty of places for it to hide. Walking quietly, we keep our eyes peeled for a second glance at the owl.
There it is. Oh gosh. Did you see it? Straight ahead. I think if we keep going, because
It flew
straight ahead. It was straight ahead, and then it flew straight ahead. Now we know sort of roughly where it is. You saw a flicker of movement, but quite far away. Yeah, so this area here, again, so it's lodgepole pine trees that still have their needles, and their trunks are blackened. So likely was like a fire that was burning along the ground, I guess. It didn't get super hot.
Walking through a burned forest feels surreal. Anything that survived the fire physically is burned black. The trees standing dead, the ground. Right after this fire, it would have looked like a complete dead zone. But now, 2 years later, lots of grasses are growing up and they're already hip high. They're brown because it's October, but in spring they would have been lush and green. Some of the dead trees are quite large.
Well, let's walk through the stand of pine trees. Again, they're burnt, they're standing. These ones don't have their needles, but they have lots of cones. Oh, some of them have needles. A bunch of cones still on the trees, but lots on the ground. And actually, we can see here, these ones are blackened and they've been opened up.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want us to give that a shake and see if there's like any cones or seeds still in there?
No, I don't hear anything. Oh, there's some stuff falling out. Oh, that might be just dirt. Yeah, okay, look at this tree right here. So there's one lodgepole pine tree surrounded by, there's some willows. These look like burnt spruce trees, actually.
Yeah.
But this is quite a large tree. I mean, on Yukon standards again. And it is, every single branch is covered in cones that are open. So those cones have been activated. They've dumped their seeds out. And now there's a bounty of seeds out there. And so small rodents that rely on those seeds but normally couldn't break open the cones now are getting a buffet presented to them. So things like voles would move in and just capitalize on those products, which then attracts the raptors that can see them because there's not a lot of leaves or vegetation that's protecting them, and so on and so forth.
And I wonder if voles are one of the first to move in because they do actually tunnel underground, right? So unlike some other rodents that would want these seeds, they might wait for more of the vegetation to come in.
That tracks, right? So a vole tunnels underground. It doesn't need the vegetation to hide as much as a squirrel does. And so it could really capitalize on this small period between a fire and early pioneer stage plants that would regenerate here.
Voles are small, boxy rodents with shorter tails than mice. Meadow voles, in particular, are drawn into the burn by forbs, small, delicate plants like twinflower that grow back soon after a fire. That's according to our colleague, Tom Jung, the senior wildlife biologist with the Yukon Department of Environment.
It's not just that you'll get voles in, but their populations actually will do well. And voles tend to be cyclic. They respond to disturbances such as fires or things, and you may get an abundance of voles. And when you get an abundance of voles, you're going to get some of the predators that enjoy eating them. So you might see foxes early on in the fire when the forest is still quite open and the understory is quite green. So it's quite contrasting.
One might see a red fox hunting voles or mice in a fresh burn. One might also see them walking down Main Street in Whitehorse. These canines are very adaptable to new environments and are commonly seen in our urban areas. Though even in its current state, this fresh burn looks more appealing to me than the parking lots that the foxes have been known to frequent.
Just heard a chickadee sound. That's another species that would really capitalize on the seeds being released because they're a big seed eater. That sounds like a boreal chickadee, too. It has that buzz to the call.
So see about the chickadee, this burned area doesn't provide good shelter from predators for them, but because adjacent is better coverage, they can come out here, get food, and then go into the area where they're safer from predators.
The Boreal Chickadee is a true Canadian bird. It lives in the boreal forest all across the country. And unlike its relative, the more ubiquitous black-capped chickadee, the boreal version barely dips south of the 49th parallel. Although the boreal chickadee, which has a brown head, is known to live in older coniferous forests, this burn is small enough that spruce and pine trees are never far away. Carrie and I turn our attention now from the sky to the ground. The vegetation hasn't filled in yet, and the soil offers clues as to who else has been passing through.
Mostly elk tracks.
Yeah.
Heaps. In fact, I'm kind of annoyed that we're not seeing them right now.
Looks like they just
hang out here.
Lots of grass is here, just sort of like, I don't know what kind of, like a fairly common Yukon grass. Are the elk eating this grass, or who's eating this grass, do you think?
So all ungulates are on this spectrum of browsers to grazers. And grazers are like cows that eat grass, and then browsers eat higher shrubs and woodier things. And I think it's a bit of a misleading to put, like all moose eat this and all deer eat that. But they're all on a spectrum, and then food is food. So elk lean a little bit more to the grazing side than the browsing side. So they might enjoy this grassy area, whereas a moose that leans a bit more to the browsing side probably wouldn't find as much to eat in here just yet. And it's waiting for the willow and the young aspens to grow up a bit more.
If you haven't seen an elk before, with their light brown coat and darker fur around their head and legs, you could confuse it with a caribou. But elk and caribou are usually found in different habitats. There are only a few hundred elk in the Yukon, but their range does overlap with one of their other relatives, the mule deer. According to Tom Jung, both would be attracted to the burn by the fresh grass and little plants.
Definitely, species that are interested in forbs, anyways, would really come in the spring because that's when they're most nutritious, they're most green. By the time we get into late summer and early fall, they lose a lot of their nutritional value for wildlife. But those that are more grazing, they're there for the grasses, then they can be there a little longer because grasses will hold their nutrition much longer through the season. But it depends really what they're there looking for.
By now, the plants and grasses hold little appeal. Eating those would be about as tasty as the forgotten lettuce rotting at the back of my fridge. But this is still a good time to look for elk in this general area, the Takhini Valley. Even if you don't see them, you stand a chance of hearing them, especially around sunset. During the mating season in September and October, the males emit a peculiar bugle to make their presence known to the females they are courting and any males contesting their dominance. We don't spot any elk in the flesh or fur, but as Carrie and I head back to our car, something else catches my eye. Look at that tree there. It looks like already maybe like a woodpecker or something has been removing the bark there, hey? Somebody's trying to get at the end.
Yeah.
There, maybe. Back at the office, I follow up on the woodpecker beat with Michael Quinn. For the last several years, the researcher and his colleagues with the Wildlife Conservation Society have been tromping through recent wildfire burns to look for and study animals that use tree cavities. Michael was in Montreal when I caught up with him.
So a cavity is a hole in a tree, and it's used for nesting. It's excavated by a woodpecker. So there's like the primary excavators, the woodpeckers, they make all the holes in the trees. And then there's secondary cavity users, which are like songbirds or small mammals, sometimes owls or small raptors that are dependent on cavities for nesting, but they can't make their own. So they have to rely on the woodpeckers to make the cavities.
Michael says the most common woodpecker they see in fresh burns is the black-backed woodpecker. He says they excavate holes in dead trees, mostly spruce, not just to use as nests and lay their eggs, but to get at an important food source, a type of fire-loving beetle that eats decaying wood.
When a fire goes up, like the smoke goes in the air, and all these beetles are able to sense that smoke. I don't know if they smell it or how they sense it, but they sense it. And they fly from it can be up to 100 kilometers away, and they colonize the forest. You can hear them, especially immediately after the fire, the first year or two. It can be really loud. You can hear them chewing, all sorts of different kinds of chewing too. It's pretty cool.
The black-backed woodpecker also makes noise. rather loudly when it's jackhammering a hole into a tree with its hard bill designed just for that. But otherwise, these birds are almost impossible to see against the side of a charred black tree. For that reason, the researchers look for clues like what Carrie and I saw: bark flaked off a tree and a mess of fresh wood chips on the ground below. Michael says after 3 or 4 years in a burn, most black-backed woodpeckers move on. With no shortage of wildfires, they're off to a more recent burn to look for more yummy beetles. When these medium-sized woodpeckers move out, that's when the other birds and mammals can use their tree cavities, these secondary users. We'll talk more about them in future episodes. Before letting Michael go, I asked him about the owl Carrie and I saw. We thought it might be a great gray owl, but Michael says that's unlikely.
It would be a little surprising to me, though this past summer I saw a great gray owl in a burn, and that was the first time I saw one in a burn, so that was super exciting.
Michael says it's more likely we saw a northern hawk owl, which are known to frequent recent burns because they primarily hunt voles in the summer. And, as we've already established, meadow voles like recent burns.
There's a lot of them in the burns. We've found, I think, like 6 or 7 northern hawk owl nests in burns, or maybe even more, which I think is pretty significant.
We also know that if Carrie and I had any birding chops between the two of us, we'd be able to tell the difference between a tall owl with a long tail and a medium owl with a pointed tail.
Okay, in my defense, it was a very fleeting look at the owl. It was flying through the trees.
I mean, it was so brief I didn't even know it was an owl.
I only knew it was an owl because of the silent flight. So the feathers don't make any noise when they flap, and I was able to narrow it down from all the other possible raptors to owl.
Okay, so we need to dust up on our identification of raptors in flight, but we do know that a recent burn is a great place to go looking for wildlife. What else are our takeaways from today?
I think the Takhini Bridge Fire is really interesting because it's not that big. You can really see the creation of what's called edge habitat between burned and unburned forest. It's like 2 habitats in one.
Yeah, in the areas that did burn, you can see all the plants growing back, and you can see how this creates new habitat for wildlife.
I think it's important to remember, though, that animals tend to use forests at different stages and that animals move around. So nothing we talked about here is hard and fast. There's always going to be exceptions.
And there's always going to be surprises.
Yeah, a burn is an easy corridor for animals to move through. So it might not be prime habitat for a bear just yet, but a bear could easily be lumbering through looking for grasses to eat. I wouldn't come here looking specifically for them, but I think you should always keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, animals show up in unexpected places all the time.
Yeah, like, for example, several years ago, a mountain goat showed up in a backyard in urban Whitehorse. And no one believed the person who called it in because we're like so far away from mountain goat habitat. But it can happen.
Yeah, that would blow my mind.
It was shocking.
So generally speaking, you're not going to see a mountain goat in the Takhini Bridge Fire burn.
Probably not, no.
But there are lots of other things you could go looking for. Just today, for example, we saw signs of elk, deer, chickadee, woodpeckers, voles, red fox, northern hawk owl, and more.
And this isn't the only place that you can go looking for these animals. The key to successful wildlife viewing is knowing where to look, and understanding fire ecology will help narrow down your search. So speaking of searches, where are we going to next, Karen?
Next episode, we're heading back to the Takhini Bridge Fire, and we're going to look at how the habitat will change and what animals that will draw into the area. And also looking at how the little itty-bitty plants are going to grow up, and eventually there's going to be a forest there again. It's going to be very interesting, so don't moose out.
I can't believe you just did that.
Are my puns unbearable?
I've got to go.
This podcast was produced by the Yukon Department of Environment's Wildlife Viewing Program. Mixing and sound design was by Mark Kepke. Our theme music, White Bark Pine, was written and produced in the Yukon by Dana Jenajon and performed in collaboration with the Bennett Sun.
Fire's over, but that's only just the start.
There are no white bark pines in the Yukon, but you already knew that. This song was inspired by the white bark pine that survived the 2013 Rim Fire in Yosemite National Park, California. To learn more about wildlife in the Yukon, go to yukon.ca/wildlife viewing. You can download guides, posters, and resources and find out about free walks and talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with everyone you know who appreciates wildlife. Thanks for listening. See you on the trails.
For my home. With its cheek against the sky, upon the mountain spine, something grabbed a hold when I saw that.